Okay, so we'll see if my guest shows up. In the meantime, I am going to start recording because I've committed to be here, show up, and do it. And that's what I'm going to do. That's how you that's how you lead stronger, longer for the most part. One of the things that I was going to share earlier is that 2 weeks ago, it'll be 2 weeks tomorrow, that my son had an injury, an accident in a tournament. Yay, there's Julie. So he had an injury that was significant, collarbone dislocated, AC dislocated. And as a result, he is out on his recovery for about 6 weeks. So what happened was we thought, okay, that's it. But showing how someone can be so resilient in that, knowing that he was going 5 days a week to judo and jujitsu, and then sometimes twice a day to nothing, and going into recovery mode, this 15-year-old, he still stayed in this state of creative, innovative, holding the vision of what he wants. And it was so admirable. So Monday, my older son comes home and says he needs a new lame. And in fencing, the sport of fencing is very expensive. The things that you need for it are extremely expensive. And so he needs this new lame, which is basically this vest with the vest is like, it's $350. And my younger son Dax says, "That's crazy. I'll make you one." And he proceeds to make a lame. He's never sewn before. He finds and researches the sewing machine, gets the material, and proceeds to do it. And it is phenomenal. Astonishing to me that this young man can do that. But that's how he spent his time. He created, he innovated, he saw a problem and he solved it for his brother, let alone, and he created something that was of value. And it's just astonishing to me. I didn't think about having him on as a guest, but I probably should at some point, because that is a perfect example of leading stronger, longer. And I think that this piece around being resilient is we can't cut ourselves short as leaders. We have to keep showing up. And there's sometimes I didn't feel like showing up, and we just have to. So that's what I wanted to share. And then since my guest came, so we'll welcome you.
So
Julie, it's
sorry.
good to see you. Yeah, no worries.
No.
So since you've been a guest before, I wanted to have this be a little bit more natural and ask you what you're doing currently and just get an idea of what's happening. So welcome, take a moment. I'm so glad you're here.
Well, this has been a little bit of a comedy of errors getting ourselves together. I appreciate your patience and
Yeah, of
flexibility and all
course.
that good stuff.
It's all good. I am really happy that you're here. And what I'd love to start with is there's two things, so you can get right to it. What is your favorite mantra, or maybe it's a quote, but something that really keeps you going as that guiding principle? And then from that, how do you actually apply that? What does it look like in your everyday life practicing that?
I could be better at the second one, but I think probably that's true of all of us when we have one of those things. I would have to say the thing that drives me is you get one life. You get one. And so what are you doing with it? And that filter is really good for, okay, you have every reason to be upset and you can hang out and do that. Is that really how you want to spend your time? Probably not. You can wait. Again, is that really what you want to do? I do think that I am very good about that about work. I am less good about it about life in general. And that's a good thing for me to think about a little bit. I kind of joke that I need my grandkids around more because I can't do anything else unless when there's a 4-year-old who will discover anything it is that you don't want her to find, you don't do other things. like literally sitting at a table with crayons and watercolor markers and watercolor paint. She walks to the other side of the room and finds the acrylic markers. And I'm like, thank God I kind of looked, I was doing something with her brother, and I don't get a lot of time where he gets my undivided attention. I was like, wait a minute, it's been too quiet. And I look over and she's coloring with the paint, the real paint, the stuff that doesn't wash off paint. Everything she could possibly need is right in front of her, but she goes and finds the one thing, right? Like,
Yeah, isn't that
and
interesting? So I wonder if that's a metaphor for something,
oh, I'm
though,
sure.
because talk about stepping out of your, like being okay to color outside the lines, to go and do what someone else maybe has put you into this little corner. And wait a minute, there's something outside of this. I think that spirit, since we're talking about children and grandchildren, let's just stay on this a little bit because I think there's something to be learned from them.
Uh-huh.
Because you're saying, like, okay, well, yeah, how cool is that, though, Julie?
Oh, it's totally cool. And it's
Oh,
also
because especially
fascinating.
as an artist, she probably has that in her blood so much so that she's like, wait a minute, these silly things? I want something really cool.
I wanted something new, as I'm sure was part of it. Right, right. I've already played with things like this before. I'm gonna go get the thing I've never
Ah,
seen. I'm sure was
yeah.
part of it. Um, and then, but it's also like, I mean, she's 4, right? Like, I know who this little girl is. Like, she is fully baked. Like, and so one of the things that I think is interesting about these little people is, they're the only people on the planet shorter than me, but they are fully baked. They are exactly who they are.
It's such a wrong concept to think that they don't know everything at 4 or 3 or
Well, or that they're
they're
going to have
practicing
personality
so much.
transplants. Nobody gets you also get one of those.
Yeah.
And I know who these people are, but it was interesting. It was also her first time spending the weekend. Um, so it was interesting to see what she would do. And she is third of 4, and her middle, the 7-year-old was here, not the 10-year-old. And so it was also interesting to see him have to be big brother. Um, and sort of like, no, in this weekend, you're the big brother.
So let's look at how that is with this you only get one life because I bet that that's not what they look through lens wise.
Oh, for them?
They're just
I
in the
think
moment, aren't they?
for sure.
Because maybe it's not even conceptual that you only get one. You only get one chance. Like, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway. I mean, this is really interesting to
I
unpack.
don't
And
think they
I
worry
don't
about
want to follow this trail, but it's interesting.
I think they're different about mistakes. I think and at 4, there aren't any. It's all learning. Um, but she is
Interesting.
very much her own person. She is the bossiest of her siblings. Um, I mean, at a certain point, I looked at her and I was like, I don't take orders. You want to try that again? Please. Uh-huh. Right? Like she is in charge, and I suspect her older brothers cave pretty easily because she's cute and it's not worth the energy to argue with her. I think they don't even ask a question about whether there's more than one. It is the only one they have. I think as they get older, they see other things and then things happen and they want do-overs, but they're still pretty little, and so no, they're always
It's cool.
exploring.
It's something to unpack for sure because I think, think about it as parents, as grandparents, as people that are stewards of these little lives, we are leading them. And what path are
Mhm.
we leading them down? And are we setting this example for them to lead stronger and lead longer themselves first, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Purposely in all areas. And I think that sometimes, yeah. So okay, so there's a lot to unpack, but Julie, you have started something new in your field, and it is spectacular. So I'd
Oh,
really
thank
like
you.
you to share. I want you to unpack how you came about specializing in this and bridging into that. Like, how did you go from moving? The last time we talked, you were talking about how you were on campaigns and you were really intense with the campaign, in politics and that whole arena, which is that requires that requires, besides creativity, right, a whole amount of energy and persistence in on a course. And this here, what you're doing with women, can you just share with us what you're doing, how that came about, and how this is now evolving? What do you see
What do
happening
I
with in
see?
the future?
So what Stefan is talking about is I hosted an event this year that I called Women Who Lead, but was actually the 10th year I've hosted a women's event that used to have a different name. And gosh, there's a few pieces to this puzzle. I mostly work with nonprofits and government agencies around strategic planning and future casting and leadership development in general. But I also was a candidate 9 years ago. And as a woman, there was the easiest way to explain what it was like to be a candidate is to tell you about the Halloween costume I wore later, which was a pantsuit where I had a cutout of a person's hand on my rear end, a smile on a stick, so I never stopped smiling, earphones so somebody could tell me what to say, and cookie recipes on my grip card, right? So, I mean, it was so lots has changed in 10 years, not nearly as much as we would have liked, as any of us would like. And it was, I joke that at, 50 something and overweight, I experienced more sexism than I did at 18 and cute. I learned a lot. And while I had actually already done the first event for women, it definitely solidified it. So I coach some women elected officials. I work on campaigns for pro-choice Democratic women. Please keep listening if you disagree. But the campaign space is very different for women. And it still is. And it's different from a fundraising standpoint. And it's different from a what you're allowed to say standpoint. It's better, but it's not great. And
So I
so,
have to, I really am curious about this.
sure.
It's in what you are allowed to say. Now, wait a minute. For someone to have the guts, the wherewithal, the energy to go and run for an office, don't you think what their voice and their original voice is more important than what they're allowed to say? So, and I don't know anything about this, so you're enlightening us. It is, and then when you were telling about that Halloween costume, I wasn't getting it, but now you're
Okay.
unpacking, and it's like, oh dear. And is that really what it's about? Because that's not what I know, studying from, oh, it's a grassroots and you're taking action and you're empowering others and you're coming from this local grassroots effort to say what's true and stand up for what's true and right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the
Most
case.
of the men are better donors, but they'll knock a zero off your check because you're a girl. Like, and so that hand has a very real story. I mean, of a person who's like, well, you're in a primary and I don't want any of your other competitors to see me give you money. So can you meet me over here in the corner where hand on my rear end hands me a check that was missing a zero of what I expected. Because when I asked him for money for the man I was running to succeed, that check had another zero. And I got a choice. I'm at a big event. What am I gonna do about that? Absolutely nothing. Put the check in my purse, say thank you, smile, and move on. When the race is over, we can have a conversation. But between now and the day of this primary, my job's to win. There is nothing about yelling at you in public that helps me do that. I will do that later. I got very good at compartmentalizing. Right. And so that's the hand. The smile on a stick is if you have a bad day, it makes it to Facebook. She seemed grumpy. She looked tired. I've done 18 hours a day for 68 days. Yes, I'm tired. And apparently I didn't put on more makeup before I went to the grocery store. And God forbid you bark back. Now, I think if I had it to do over again, I would bark a little more about some things that I literally just did, though. When they go low, I go high. I will make a list after this election. I have plenty. There is no need to respond today. There will be plenty of opportunity, right? But it doesn't often help. And I mean, there was one of my opponents was the only woman in a 5-way race. One of my opponents literally had mailers that said he was the champion of women because his mother was a lactation coach. Didn't make that up. the joke in my, but I had a rule that was we tried to make things that were hard, funny, fast. And so, and he knows this and I'm not naming him, but um, at a certain point, the joke was that pretty soon we were going to get a mailer with him with his feet in stirrups. Like because like what? Huh? Uh, no, excuse me. No. And if you think it's crazy, we had a candidate in our state running against somebody who I was working with this year, who is an ER nurse. The man is an ER nurse and claimed he had performed abortions because he had given people the morning after pill. So he was more pro-choice than she was. Who cares what you think about choice? That's really how we're treating. I mean, so even almost 10 years later, there's still this, it's different. And if you are, and you do bite back, you better be willing to be called out as a not nice, witchy person because you dared to yell back. And
There's
there's,
so much
and
here.
it's
So,
not,
yeah. Okay. So clearly, I mean, forgive me, this is genuinely like soap opera, meaning there's just one thing after another, another story, another this. And I like compartmentalizing. I'm great at that. I was like, okay, let's compartmentalize this. How can I actually just stay on this and talk? But this is nonsense. This is ludicrous. No wonder. And this is only like a little pin drop of what the politics are. I can't even imagine like even actually being in. We know this though. Okay, so we don't need to go into the whole
it's like,
where things
yeah.
are.
So
But
it's hard. And I think so to sort of bring us back to what you asked me about, which was this event you were wondering
yes, the women,
and
yes,
was a part of, is it's very clear that women need a space to tell the truth about these things. And they need a space where there are other women leaders, because whether we like it or not, I will screw up the exactitude of these statistics, but in 2002, there were 12% of senior executives were women, and it fell to 11. It's 2024. What do you mean it's 12%? It's not even half of half, right? Like, and so it became very clear that women need a space. Most women who are women executives also have all the emotional labor of home. Part of the reason that 12% is 12% isn't just because they don't get hired. They also don't aspire because it's not like somebody's going to pick up the emotional labor at home. And so they're not at the golf course, they're not in the sports bar, they aren't in proximity to each other, right? They're not hanging out. They hang out at a PTA meeting or a soccer game. And so if you have figured out which kids' moms are also exactly right, like they're not, so it gives women in leadership roles 3 days to talk to each other, and I get to facilitate it. We actually do a strategic plan for the big things in your life, and we work on leadership skills, half of which are really about taking care of yourself all the time. One of the things we spent a lot of time talking about this year is that, like, we think self-care is what you do when you're fried, and self-care is what you do to never get fried. But so there's those pieces, but part of it was because I put women together. I mean, I tried not to. I think we've talked about this before, Stefan. I really did not mean to throw a women's event the first time. But a couple things happened. I work in the human and community services space, so there are more women. And the hotel kept making mistakes that they kept fixing with wine and chocolate. And so and there was the voice in my head that says you need to do women. And I'm like, I did that. I'm not doing that anymore. And so it ended up being a women's event. But the magic in the room was proximity. People who had heard of each other in the field actually met that person who, God, I think I heard you speak 3 years ago on a panel about blah, blah, blah. So there's that magic. But then the other magic, every time I've done this, there's been some interesting little thing that I couldn't have predicted. So that first time there were 3 women who were dealing with some serious traumatic brain injury issues with family members. When I did the test run, I had somebody who was trying to do international adoption, somebody who had adopted a child from another country, and somebody else who was supporting an orphanage. They needed to talk to each other. So some of this is about the magic, but part of it is we just need to be in the room with each other. Need to know that you're not the only person that stuff happened to. I'm close friends with a woman who ran statewide for a couple of years in a row, and was talking to her a couple of weeks ago because she's not running this cycle and what she's learned. And she's like, "Oh, and you thought it stopped after I won, right?" No, it would happen in Richmond, right? Like it would happen in the state capitol. It isn't because those guys aren't used to having women in the room. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be political. Harvey Weinstein overturned yesterday. Like, what does it take to say, no, you can't, my body is not part of this conversation?
Yeah, this is wow. Okay. So let's go there a little bit. How is it that we as women leaders can get more into this space of having these conversations? Clearly, you've created the safe space to do that. What is the bridge? I'll just be honest here with myself, knowing that I probably wouldn't show up to an event like that because I'm really focused. I try to fix myself, meaning I try to do it all myself. Right. And I think that that is
Shocking.
some, right. Right.
Shocking. Right. Of course you do.
And so I wonder if that is, and I think that that kind of gets misconstrued as what leadership is for women, that we're supposed to do it all ourselves, or we have to, right, be in this strong lane of being very focused. And so this is really interesting to unpack, and being completely authentic here with
Can I
you in this
observe?
moment. I'm not censoring myself. And I'm realizing that, I don't get into the news or whatever, but the issue with the turnover yesterday, and I didn't know about that. And then when you said that, it triggered me back into the entertainment industry, which is what I started out in. And that I remember the whole mindset as a girl, a woman, a female in the modeling and entertainment industry, that my body was not mine. And and that's not okay. That is so not okay. But it's so then, I mean, that's one piece, but then it's like, wait a minute, my own thoughts, my own beliefs, my own, right? So share a little bit more, because I know you're passionate about this. What is it that a woman could do? And you've shared in the past some of the mistakes, and I'll make sure that video, that our previous interview is attached to this. That, like, how can we shift this in 2024? We were going in the right direction from 2002, right, to now. It's like, whoa, okay, what's going on, and how are we going to turn this ship around a little bit? What are those things? Yes, getting together and meeting in that room, but here's the thing, I'm not going to show up to that room.
Well, so I'm torn here because I want to talk about that and I want to talk about that room. So I think if you asked people in that room what their comfort level is in asking for help, I would tell you that to a person, they don't like doing it. They came to meet new people. They came to have a weekend for themselves. They can't, there's a lot, we've focused on a piece of it, and there's no agenda that says, how much does it suck to be a woman in the workplace, right? Like that's not the point of the weekend. It is part of the stuff that you got to address to figure out how you're going to get where you want to go, because it's one of the puzzle pieces, and it's safe in that room to acknowledge that there are things you got to climb over. And the one we've focused on in this conversation happens to be this gender issue. It's not the only thing, right? It's also, for some people, it's about which degrees they have. For other people, there's other parts of the puzzle. So I wouldn't want anybody to think that it's a weekend to like rag on men. It's not. I do think that successful women have fought to be successful in part by not asking for help. And in fact, it's one of the questions I ask when I hire people. How do you ask for help? When do you ask for help?
Okay.
Now,
So how does one ask for help, and how do you hire help, and how do you, so answer those for us.
so the reason I ask, because almost everybody gives me the same answer. Well, I really try to do it myself first, and I only ask for help if I really, really need it. Here's the problem with that. You know, the burnout stuff we talk about? That is a recipe for burnout. So when I put on my boss hat, and that those questions enable me to say this to people, here's the problem with that. If you have a deadline on Friday and you tell me on Wednesday that you're not sure about something or you're struggling to meet that deadline, I got lots of ways to fix it. I teach you, I get some help, I break it into smaller pieces and give something to somebody else. I got tons of things I can do about that. You come to me at 3 o'clock on Friday, guess what? You're working this weekend. I can't fix it if you don't tell me early enough.
Okay,
And
so
I
how,
expect to have to fix it.
yeah, and so I'm looking at this from two ways. You're almost like in that viewpoint, because I can shift roles from my CEO hat to my project manager hat.
Hmm.
And and to me, what you just stated was more so project manager versus the CEO, because the CEO is like, I see this, I want this done, go make it happen. Right.
Uh-huh.
And then and I spend maybe 60 minutes maybe maybe once a week I'm 60 minutes in that, tapping into that vision, and then I'm like, I got to be project manager, and I've also got to be I'm actually in the trenches doing all the work, right?
Yep.
So and I think, I'm in a different scope. There are leaders who are 90% CEO. Those
I'm
women,
probably
a different
50%
thing.
CEO, maybe a little more. I actually I miss leading people who are doing stuff. Most of the time I'm not. I'm leading their managers,
Mm.
right? Um, but when I'm interviewing people who are going to be doing stuff, I want them going to their manager early. I have one person on my team who cannot meet a deadline to save her life. And I know her pretty well, and I know what the issue is. And the issue is nothing's ever done and nothing's ever perfect enough. And so one of the things I've been working with her manager on is we're not saying I want a clean draft on Thursday so I can review it early, because we tried that. That didn't work. It's like, what you're going to say is wherever you are on Thursday, I want to see it. That gives you enough time to know if we're on the right track or not. That takes away the need to be perfect, because at 5 o'clock on Thursday, you are, which sometimes turns into 9 o'clock on Friday morning, but that's going to be sent to you in whatever state it is. And there is no discussion about what the state is. Whatever it is getting sent on time.
Yeah, that sounds collaborative leadership. I
Right?
love that.
Because
Love that.
otherwise,
Yeah.
this thing will never be done and we will keep fighting over missed deadlines
Yeah.
because it will never go far enough. It will never be perfect. It's not going to be.
So I want to respect your time and get a couple more pieces in here. So if we
Sure.
were to, let's say, what's your number one go-to book? I'd love to get that. Currently, what are you reading? What do you love?
I love The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho.
Yeah.
And if you didn't read the whole book, just read the foreword. I hope that's engaging enough. The foreword is about what it took for him to decide to be a writer
Well, I
and
had
go for
my
it.
boys read it, and I think it's a short book, so it's worth reading. And to explain a little bit more, because you talk about journeys, and since that's all about the journey and then finding yourself, kind of like, okay, so you're going in this circle and then you're come back to right where you are, and you only get one life. So tie all that in for us as we wrap. I know, but I'm going to make you do it anyway.
I
And
don't know,
then
that's a class. Um, well, and I think it resonates because, I still remember finishing college and talking to my mom and her mentor about what I wanted to do with my life. And they didn't get it. Because it didn't have a title and a job description. And they wanted to help, but they didn't know how to help me do this thing. And full circle moment about 6 months ago, the niece of a good friend of mine was like, Steve says I should talk to you because I think I kind of want to do what you do. And nobody understands what it is. I'm like, yeah, nobody understands now either. It's fine, right? doesn't mean you can't do it. And part of it is that you were talking about authenticity. I'm me in a lot of spaces. And so other people are like, but you work with government and you work with those agencies and you work with these employers and you work with nonprofits and you work with politicians. And I don't understand because you're everywhere. No, I do the same thing over and over and over in lots of places. And mostly it's that I see patterns and help people move them forward. And I'm really good at humans. And that's all it is. People want it to be more magical. It's not. But what I loved about The Alchemist and the foreword that I read easily 25 years ago is it's about carving your own path. It's not just that he goes on a journey and meets himself. He goes on many journeys as a part of that longer journey. And he thinks he's going on this part for this reason, but he learns a different lesson. And so then he goes to the next thing. So do something about that lesson, and he learns another different one. And that keeps happening where what he thinks he's going to do, which follows some norm, and that's what he's imposing on it, keeps changing. And in the end, he figures out his own path. And that's sort of done short in the foreword about nobody understood being a writer, and nobody understood that you could actually write about these things. And which genre does it go in the bookstore isn't the way you figure it out. Right. And so it is about carving your own path. And when people say that's doesn't work, I'm like, still here. And even accountants have variance. I struggle with this idea that we're supposed to do one thing. You and I've talked about this, right? You're supposed to pick something and do it. Well, first of all, I think that's a pretty masculine model. We can have a whole conversation about difference in brains. But more than that, you want an accountant that understands you and the work you do. So now we've eliminated a bunch. And of those, you want the one who gets who you are. And now we've eliminated. They aren't all the same, even though they have the same title and the same job description. And so I love that book for those reasons. What am I reading right now? I decided I needed fun. And so I'm reading a mystery called I Have Some Questions for You.
Cool.
Yeah, I needed a plot and I needed something that would hold me to it. And so I try to intersperse my reading.
Nice. I love that. So if we were just to end on what would be the advice that you would give, and it would be everything you were describing, it really does shift to if you just decide to lead your own path. Because I mean, that's everything that I want to do with Lead Stronger Longer is that those that are here to make a positive impact, those like you, like me, my boys, that they are here, they are innovators. They don't always go to that drum. They don't beat to that drum. They just don't, and they never can, and it will crush their soul. I'm the advocate for them to be able to lead stronger, longer. I don't know what that shows up as, but I know I'm here to support them, right? And yes, I have to pick my lane and say, okay, yes, it's wellness and it's resilience and it's in those pieces. Okay, so I'll say that. But what would be the number one advice that you would give to someone, maybe an up and coming leader or someone from who needs to hear something right now around leading
I go
stronger?
back to the help thing before we get done, but let me answer this question. That'll help me separate out how I'm going to answer this. And actually, if I were talking to your sons, like if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. Do the stuff that feels right. Do the stuff that brings you joy. You get one life, stop, wait. So that's the advice to them. To the average listener, who I suspect is more like us, is maybe a small business owner or an executive who's leading a team. I want you to look at your to-do list, and anything that's been on there for 3 years, I want you to delete. You aren't going to do it and you don't want to do it. I don't care if you should lose 20 pounds. I do not care if you should save this or that. I do not stop it. The amount of energy you waste feeling bad about what you do. So dump it. And then if you really do mean it, if you really want to go to Hawaii for 3 weeks, not dream of Hawaii for 3 weeks, and some people do just want to dream, but you actually want to go, book the flight. Like, like that's it. Like, do the things you want to do. Stop pretending you want to do things you don't. That's that piece. And the asking for help thing, because I think it is an issue, particularly for women who think that strong means I don't ask for anything. I was talking to a woman who's been my accountability partner now for probably 10 years yesterday. And she's recently had some serious health challenges. And she just threw her weekend retreat. And I was really worried. Like she was in the ER 2 weeks before this retreat, right? So like, how is this going to go? And what have you set up for yourself? And it was beautiful. She had arranged for somebody to make food and arranged a backup plan for that. She had met with her team in advance. So somebody else was responsible for all the things that could be handed off so that she only did the things that she had to be the one to deliver. That only happened because she planned for it and because she asked for help. And what she was talking about in her past, and I'm sure many of the nights and weekends I have worked have been the same thing of I'm not going to ask for help. So now I don't have any. So I have to do it all by myself. And then I feel exhausted and that little martyr thing starts to show up, even though I'm not really her, right? No, not going to go there. But I feel like that. Why? Because I didn't plan for it and I didn't ask for help. The answer to the questions you don't ask is always no.
That is so perfect. This is something I think so many need to hear. I needed to hear this today, and I'm going to review that because that is true. I love letting go of that stuff that I'm in that process right now. So this is so perfect. I am thrilled to have you in this new space and being able to introduce you to my people, my audience that with this Women Who Lead. It's so beautiful. I've met the group who were there. It is nourishing. It is genuine. You can clearly see how awesome Julie is, and it's so needed. How can people get a hold of you? Find out more.
The easiest thing to do, and I actually mean this, and people don't do it, so I want you to prove me wrong, folks. You go to ileadstrategies.com, which I'm sure Stefan will put in the notes. There's a pop-up. That pop-up lets you pay me, which you don't have any reason to do and won't find an invoice, and it has a calendar. Send me an email at julie@ileadstrategies or put yourself on my calendar.
I love it. There is a site, though, with the We Lead, right?
There is, and it's The Women Who Lead.
The Women Who Lead. Yeah.
It needs to be updated for next year, but
oh, but it looks so good, and you have some really beautiful pieces on there
cool.
that I think are nourishing, and I hope that you bring it into there's a lot of women organizations. I think that this is one piece that's missing in some of those women organizations.
And it's evolved over time. Like you can kind of tell from that page that originally it was going to be a hybrid event because it had been in person and then it was online. And then I was going to try to hybridize it. And then the first people to register all registered to be there in person. So I changed it. And so it's an ever evolving piece, but it's about delivering the same groundedness and belief in yourself that I think it has always been about.
And I think it's so needed. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for showing up. I know I was going to go live anyway and just like do because I committed to it.
Right. And I'm sitting there
to.
talking to this guy I was trying to solve a problem and I reached out to the CEO of a company and his brother's been sick. And so I was hearing about his brother's heart transplant list thing and couldn't disengage quickly.
So we'll send a good vibes to them. And I will just say to everyone and anyone listening, thank you so much for being here. I hope you heard what Julie had to say and it helped in some way. That is my hope for this podcast and video, because I'm really hoping to show up more regularly in this way as a woman leader. Right, siloed for sure. I'm definitely siloed. I'm definitely not an executive corporate of whatever. And but the thing is we need more. We need to know that we're not alone, and I'm not doing a chat AI GPT or whatever, all the, this is live right now. I didn't read a chat GPT thing, and which I love, by the way. My chatty is my second VA, right? I'll do VA stuff like that. But this, I just think I want to do more of this authentic and really talking and connecting in this way. Yes, the framework of those questions, but oh my gosh, just listening to you, I have like 5 more questions I want to keep going.
We
But
can do that again, and we can get our schedules better synced. I
yeah,
apologize.
we'll do that. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thanks.
All right.